Hello, my name is Zoe Nelson, and I'm the Education Program Manager at King Conservation District. Thank you for joining us today as we explore what it means to have salmon friendly lakes. Today, we'll have a special focus on Lakes Washington and Sammamish. And these iconic lakes are not only central to our region's natural beauty and recreation, but they're also critical habitat for salmon, which is a keystone species deeply tied to the health of our ecosystems, our economy, and cultural heritage. Today, we're going to look at the challenges that salmon face in lake environments, what it means for a lake to be friendly for salmon, and how communities, agencies, and individuals can work together to protect and restore these vital waters.
Hello, my name is Piper Hansen, and I'm a project manager with Mid-Sound Fisheries Enhancement Group. We've partnered with King Conservation District to bring you this webinar today. This webinar was also produced by Facet, and it was also supported by our partners, the Snoqualmie Indian Tribe, Trout Unlimited, the Water Inventory Resource Area 8, the Washington State Conservation Commission, the Salmon Recovery Funding Board, and Washington State Parks, as well as the Washington State Legislature. Thank you.
All right, we are going to kick things off with a discussion about lakes. In Western Washington, we love our lakes. Lakes provide quality of life benefits to our region. They're beautiful and they are restorative. We use them for all types of recreation. These lakes have helped to sustain the Coast Salish peoples, the Snoqualmie, Muckleshoot, and Duwamish, since time immemorial through today and into the future. Why are lakes important to you?
With our love of lakes, we also strive to balance our recreation and the use of the lake with our concerns of degradation, such as habitat loss and water quality impacts. Modifications to the lakes, especially development around the shorelines, can have widespread consequences. Development like shoreline armoring and utility infrastructure, such as direct discharge of stormwater, can degrade the lake environments over time. Much of the armoring and development that you see along the lake shores today was put in decades ago. These practices no longer reflect our current knowledge and understanding of lake health, nor our commitment to protecting our lakes. We now have a better understanding of how the health of a lake shoreline is critical to the health of the entire lake ecosystem. When we think about lake health and shorelines, let's begin by imagining what a natural lakefront would look like. With this in mind, we can think of ways to mitigate the impacts of development. When you think of a natural lakefront, what qualities do you think of? One way we can categorize shorelines in terms of their naturalness and therefore their ability to contribute to lake health is to talk about simplification versus complexity. In this image, you can see a range of modified shorelines. In the simplified shorelines with armoring, natural elements like mixed vegetation and gravels and shallow areas with dappled shade are missing. Armoring simplifies the shoreline by removing the gradual transect of the nearshore, while bulkheads straighten the lake edge and remove the natural slope between land and water. This simplification of the lake edge results in the loss of complexity. Loss of complexity means loss of microhabitats that support lake biota and water quality. Tall bulkheads remove shallow water areas and cause erosion. They also disrupt the natural movement of sediment along the shoreline. This simplification takes away the features that provide safe refuge to juvenile salmon.
A shoreline that is softened or restored to natural undeveloped state is one where we add complexity and natural features back into the environment. Nature is our best model for what we can do to protect, maintain, and improve lake health. This may mean the shoreline has a more curvy shape, and there is a gradual slope between the land and the water. In the shoreline zone, natural sediments are allowed to shift and settle over time. Woody debris and vegetation are interspersed along the shoreline and provide a complex habitat with ideal conditions for migrating juvenile salmon. Improvements to shorelines that focus on adding complexity include reintroducing natural elements like logs, gravel, and vegetation. These materials add structure and shade to the shoreline and provide areas for small fish to hide. Elements like root wads, logs, and boulders can also be used to soften waves and wakes and make it easier for emergent plants to establish at the shoreline. With intentional restoration, we can bring back many of the natural features that keep the lake healthy. Today, development around the lake prioritizes shoreline restoration, like removing old armoring and retrofitting infrastructure to preserve water quality. As our knowledge about lakes change, we see attitudes about the lake protection evolve as well. There are a range of alternative restoration projects that can improve the complexity and health of the shoreline and lake. If you're really looking to make a difference, one of the best things that you can do is remove shore armoring and restore to a softened shoreline or a natural beach. This type of project is complicated and requires professional assistance, but it's such a key restoration action that many partners are there to help. There are incentives for homeowners to remove bulkheads, including professional design help and grants and funding for construction. Beach coves are a smaller footprint alternative to full bulkhead removal and can provide habitat, shade, and improved recreational access to the homeowner. Continuing down the range of shoreline restoration alternatives, efforts to revegetate the shoreline can positively impact both habitat and water quality. In this aerial image example, we can see that the shoreline has been completely cleared of vegetation and lawn is being maintained as close to the water as possible. Loss of tall trees and replacement of diverse native vegetation with monocultures like lawns removes shade and habitat from the shoreline. It also affects soil health and the ability of the landscape to intercept runoff that may contain chemicals and toxins before they reach the lake.
Shoreline vegetation plays an important role in capturing day-to-day pollution. Surface runoff and other stormwater pollution compounds quickly in developed areas and contributes to lake health degradation, including algal blooms. Excess nutrients is a primary cause of water quality degradation, and toxins, such as those found from soaps, tires, and chemicals, contribute to habitat loss and deterioration. Today, we understand that many common activities, such as car washing, pressure washing driveways, or fertilizing plants and lawns, can generate pollutants that are harmful to aquatic life. We know that simple changes, such as using phosphorus-free fertilizer, picking up dog waste, and not allowing runoff to drain into the lake, can help to protect water quality and preserve the lake health. One example of a toxin in surface runoff that you may have seen in the news recently is 6-PPDQ, a byproduct of a chemical used on car tires to prevent them from naturally breaking down. Local researchers determined it was responsible for killing 90% of annual coho returns. They also found that very basic green infrastructure techniques, or GSI, such as filtering runoff through compost, effectively removed the contaminants. Rain gardens are an example of a simple green infrastructure project, one that homeowners can install. These planted areas are specifically designed to allow natural water infiltration. They incorporate special soils, earthwork, and native plants to capture and hold water. Our state has great resources for rain garden designs specific to Western Washington, including the Rain Garden Handbooks published by Washington Ecology, linked here. It's free and it includes a guide on how to design and construct your own rain garden. Locally, there are also incentives for homeowners to create rain gardens. Two great resources are also linked here, 12,000 Rain Gardens and SPU's RainWise program. You can check your eligibility on their website for their incentive programs and to get more information. Apart from rain gardens, shoreline landscaping with native plants and planting to mimic natural landscape patterns are great ways to enhance lakefront health. You can replace plants over time or start by targeting areas adjacent to the shoreline. When you select new plants, the goal is to have diversity in plant species and structure. This means you include trees, shrubs, and ground cover, and you add vegetation that will overhang the shoreline and cast shade and drop debris into the water. Native insects that have adapted to living on and eating native plants also fall off overhanging plants into the water and are a food source for salmon. Here in the Pacific Northwest, we have a great selection of native plants, including fruiting and flowering varieties, many with great lush leaves and textures. You're also likely to spend less on irrigation if you go with native plants. You can inquire about native plants at local nurseries. They're excited to help, or order through KCD's native plant sale that happens annually every fall. Another shoreline landscape consideration is the size and location of any lawn areas. Lake-friendly lawns are small and set away from the shoreline and maintained without fertilizers in as natural way as possible. Smaller lawns, or lawns interrupted by trees and shrubs, makes yards less attractive to geese while providing more habitat for native shore and songbirds. Leave a generous buffer of native plants between the lawn and the shoreline to absorb runoff. Finally, you can make your landscape more shoreline friendly by maintaining your yard to discourage or control invasive species. You can help by learning to identify common destructive species and the best management practices for their control. Several of these species require special methods of tools for management, like knotweed and milfoil. Please don't try to remove these without checking the resources first. They can be pretty hard to get rid of. For others, like English ivy, there are recommended shortcuts to management that simplify removal, and you can do on your own. The Noxious Weed Board is a great resource for recommendations listed by species. You can also check out our website for more information. Beyond the shoreline, there are changes you can make in the nearshore environment that can improve shoreline health and protect juvenile salmon. As mentioned a moment ago, removal of invasive aquatic vegetation in the nearshore can restore conditions to favor our native flora and fauna. Changes to dock design can also make a huge impact. Areas of deep shade, such as under a traditional dock, attract predators from deeper water and deter juvenile salmon who perceive the area as dangerous. Juvenile salmon will often travel around the dark shade into deeper water, where they are more vulnerable to predation. You can help by changing the surface of the dock to graded decking. This surface style allows more sunlight to pass through and mimics natural dappled light and shade conditions. Thanks to changing attitudes and regulations that encourage or require graded decking, there are many products available. A dock contractor can help with surfacing options for your dock.
An unfortunate reality of our love for these lakes is that they are vulnerable to our actions. But we have local history to inspire us to believe that change can happen and you can be the change makers. Has anyone heard of Lake Stinko? Or do you remember it and where it was? In the 1940s and 50s, Lake Washington exploded with algae to the point where the water was murky, slimy, and smelled terrible. At the height of the problem, lake visibility was less than 30 inches, and it was referred to as Lake Stinko. The algae was caused by the direct discharge of raw sewage into the lake, estimated at 20 million gallons per day. Sewage brought excess nutrients, especially phosphorus, that upended the lake ecosystem. This episode prompted the creation of the Metro Project in the late 50s and 60s that redirected the sewage out of the lake. Around the same time, Lake Sammamish underwent similar improvements to redirect sewage discharge. Beyond the infrastructure changes, many regulatory changes followed that were intended to keep the lake clean and healthy. And it worked. The threats to our environment can be daunting, but examples like the Metro Project demonstrate that we can move in the right direction. It also shows what can be achieved through cooperative action. While some environmental threats will require large-scale responses, local and individual actions are usually easier, cheaper, and faster to implement, and their collective impact can be just as effective. On the macro scale, we can look at the lakes as a whole and see that there is noticeable improvement from the degraded condition of the 1950s and 60s. However, the wildlife lost during that time would have been substantial, and we know, with salmon and other species, the damage that occurred during that time and the lowering of the lake in the early 1900s, or the salmon canning industry of the late 1800s, the cumulative impact on salmon still prevail. These species are still trying to recover. And that's why it's important to continue to take steps, even small ones, to protect healthy shorelines, reduce new impacts, and restore degraded or lost lake habitat. As we continue to care and learn about lake health, we are expanding our understanding of how our actions affect these delicate systems and what we can do to keep them healthy. Thank you for joining us for part 1 of our webinar on salmon-friendly lakes. Today, we explored the vital connection between healthy lake shores and thriving salmon populations, and the everyday choices that influence our shared waters. But we're just getting started. In part 2, we'll dive into a new and emerging pollutant showing up on lake shores and what it means for salmon and lake health. More importantly, we'll share simple, impactful actions that you can take to be a part of the solution, whether you live on the water or just care about the life that it supports. So please stay tuned and join us.